Hello? Anybody home?
Today, I want you to open your mind.
I've almost come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time.
If you can get people to consent to the state of affairs in which they are living, then you have a much more easily controllable society than you would if you were relying wholly on clubs and firing squads and concentration camps.
Tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts. Prejudices.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
They do not want your children to be educated. They do not want you to think too much.
It was learned that the aliens had been and were then manipulating masses of people through secret societies, witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion.
They reach into our children. Music, television, books.
Prey on children's innocence.
How can I disprove lies that are stamped with an official seal?
So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it feels like an altar to an alien god.
Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc is now in the possession of the Army.
Too many others know what's happening out there. And no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone.
About time some of you got acquainted with the real hard truth.
You don't connect the dots, just a mass of what's all this about.
You are listening to the Secret Teachings Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. Thank you so much for joining us this special Friday edition, a Valentine's Day show, the Queen of Hearts tonight on TST Radio. TSTradio.info is the website. You can find our full show archive there, all of our past episodes, including the Super Bowl and Olympic and our general entertainment symbolism shows from this week, all on the website and on whatever platform you listen to the Secret Teachings on. rdgable@yahoo.com if you would like to email the show. I will respond to that directly, rdgable@yahoo.com. This is a one-man show, though, for the most part. It is primarily just me and my thoughts and my book collection and an obsessive compulsiveness to figure out what is more accurate, what is more true. You know, over the years, I've never really had a brand that I've intentionally projected externally for what this show is. It became the occult show. A lot of people see me as an occult expert. It's kind of like as you grow older, at least for me, I still kind of see myself as a kid. I kind of still see myself as being, basically just a child. I think most of us are like that. We all have that child attitude inside of us. And I wonder for many of you who are maybe in your 60s or 70s, do you still feel like that? I kind of feel like that. And I feel like that with radio too. I feel like I'm just that guy that used to roll into the radio station in Orlando at 4:00 in the morning and talk about vampires or ghosts or conspiracies or something like that. So over the years, I've never really branded myself. And recently in the last few years, I've kind of tried to create a brand, and that brand is definitely occult, definitely esoteric. But I've been thinking a lot about this because, especially after the Super Bowl shows earlier this week, and watching how those have kind of turned into a rebuttal of analysis or occult analysis or whatever you want to call it. I found a few podcasts and a few people online that do really good symbolic analysis. It's really for people like myself and Clyde Lewis who have done this for over 10 years. Before we knew each other, we did the Super Bowl show. We would do an analysis, and Clyde has always said it was more of an oracle of the future. I've come to look at it as a fun time, a good time, a topical subject to talk about symbolism and mythology, to talk about metaphors, and to talk about myths and what they mean to individuals and to collective society. I like to talk about symbols. I like to find the origin of holly holy days. These are really the things that drive the occult basis of the secret teachings. That's what this show has always been about. And that's, if I'm going to brand myself, I really want that to be the brand of this show, especially going forward from 2026 onward, because for the first time ever, I used StreamYard to generate these little short clips. I'm sure most of you know what shorts are. I when someone said, "Do you have shorts?" I was like, I have some shorts. I have long pants. I have sweatpants. I'm not being sarcastic. Like I didn't know what a short was. I don't use Instagram. I don't really even use X that much. I don't really use social media. So, yeah, I have a pair of shorts. I'm from Florida. I've got shorts anywhere I go in the world. I've always got a pair of shorts and socks and sandals. But I made some of these shorts, or rather, it generated them for me. And the kind of comments you get on shorts are really wild. I've got people in like a 20-second short video. I've got people saying things to me like, for example, you didn't mention this deity. So what are you covering up? Or you didn't mention this person or this conspiracy. Who are you working for? And it's a 20-second clip. If you do a 2-hour show, only the diehard listeners like those of you in the chat tonight, Joe Ryder and Tim Curley, and got a Joy in the chat, and Diane Perry and Deborah, and who else do we have in the chat tonight? There's a bunch of people here. Crazy and Mad Mutt, and who else is here? Yoda is here. Cyber Sicilian is here, etc. Diehards like you listen, but 2 hours is a lot for anybody, even for me to listen to on a one-way go. So I have to break it up into segments if I'm listening to something I really want to listen to. Okay, the point is, because I know I can be pretty long-winded, the point is, I thought a 20-second clip would be better, and then turns out that 20-second clips, all they do is they just encourage people to be dumber. So in experiencing that with the shorts, watching people become dumber and watching people become more paranoid, I think that's really what it is. And then watching the Super Bowl reactions. I mean, my friend Ryder Lee, most of you are familiar with Ryder. Ryder I'm actually texting him right now before the show started, and he said that he was getting comments on the short video he made, which went viral. He got comments about, if you're not watching the show right now on YouTube, X, Facebook, etc., our Friday shows are free. Our main archive is at tstradio.info. There's links below. But if you're not watching the show, maybe you've seen the show before. You've seen the video of the show. Behind me, it's very simple. I just have my bookshelf, and I have a noren. I have a tapestry. It is a Japanese tapestry. And it is what in calligraphy would be called a perfect circle. And it is otherwise known as an inso. You could spell it with an S or a Z, inso. And it basically represents perfection. And when one can learn to write and to clear their mind and clear their space and become one, if you will, then you can draw this perfect circle. Or if you're SpongeBob, you draw the really complicated head and then erase some of the more complicated parts, and there you go, a perfect circle. So you just draw in one stroke this perfect circle. So it represents perfection. It's like a wedding ring. It represents, eternity. It represents a lot of different things. And Ryder Lee was telling me that he's got people that are thinking that I'm a devil worshiper. I've got devil horns. So tonight I've adjusted the camera I almost want to leave it devil horns, because that freaks people out and scares them. But it's an Enzo. And, kind of reminded me of when I was on InfoWars and people are looking at my books. He's got a book on communism. He's a communist. It's like, wow. So I've just had enough experiences where, people analyze the book collection. There's devil horns when really it's an Enzo. It represents perfection and eternity. Or people think you're covering something up because the video is 20 seconds long and they think that's the whole show. It's like the internet really brings out the gold medal level crazy and paranoia. So I just don't want to even participate in that anymore. I don't want to be anywhere near that. And I really want to brand the show as being what it always has been, but just specifically really focusing on the occult, really focusing on the esoteric. So tonight, Queen of Hearts. Yes, it is an Alice in Wonderland reference, but it's also Valentine's Day. And I completely forgot it was Valentine's Day. Just totally slipped my mind. Didn't think anything of it. We were at the store last night, and we went to Costco. And we were in there and looking at some of the Nintendo Switch games they had. And we've been wanting to get a copy of Mario Party. And it was actually really cheap compared to other stores. So we got Mario Party, and as we were finished shopping, I thought this is going to be really expensive because Costco, it's a lot of stuff, but it can add up really fast. So my wife said, "Oh, I'll get Mario Party for you for Valentine's Day," and I completely forgot. But see, over here, it's not a big deal if I forget Valentine's Day because for Valentine's Day, wives and girlfriends and even female coworkers, they get guys something for Valentine's Day. Men don't reciprocate until White Day, which is next month. So it's an interesting cultural difference. On Valentine's Day, you don't get chocolates for your wife. You don't get chocolates or gifts, flowers for your significant other or your sister or your coworkers or any female in your life. You don't do that. You do it. You just do it the next month. And that is a very distinct cultural difference in Japan in the Far East as opposed to in the West, where Valentine's Day has a much different meaning. But anyway, I did not remember that it was Valentine's Day, and it's perfect because Valentine's Day is a fun holiday / holy day to talk about. Because although it's seen as a lovely and chocolate-fueled celebration, Valentine's Day is not what most folks think that it is. And that's okay because over time things change. Over time things are altered and society adapts them and changes them. And so Valentine's Day has changed a lot. It's changed because of religion. It's changed also because of, I don't like to use this word because it might place me into some political category, but it's changed because of commercialism. It's changed for a lot of different reasons. But Valentine's Day today is really not at all what Valentine's Day originally was. But it's kind of like that with all holidays. It's like that with Christmas. It's like that with Well, it's even like that with holidays or holy days, like St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is like Christmas or like Halloween. It has like a totally different original meaning. And again, that's okay because things change over time, and we don't need to celebrate a Halloween in the way that our ancestors did because we have grocery stores, we have portable heaters, we have central air. We don't need to spend our time praying and lighting bonfires and for superstitious reasons. We have our own superstitions today, and they're no different than the superstitions of our ancestors. But then again, like, what is a superstition? It's just something that's left over from the past. So even if we have an understanding of why we do something, something can that thing we do can still be superstitious because it's a remnant of a past thing that we've done, whether we know where it came from or not. But anyway, Valentine's Day is fun to talk about because you get to the point when you discuss Lupercalia, the Roman festival, and it always freaks people out when you tell them that one of the original Valentine's Day festivities included whipping the crops, and it was symbolic, it wasn't violent, but whipping crops and women with blood-soaked animal hide. And the reason that they would do this is because the idea is imparting the essence of the blood and the essence of the animal, a dog, a wolf. That's where Lupercalia comes from, imparting that on the woman. And it's the same type of animalistic, if you will, or I should say animal totem-esque tradition in Russian territory as well. Traditionally, they would use like a straw wolf, which would be a symbol of fertility, and they would put that under the bed to help women get pregnant. You know, today we have abortion, we have Planned Parenthood, which is a eugenics organization. We have groups that mostly made up of liberal women and liberal men that chant for abortion, that perform acts of like magical ritual for abortion. They love abortion. And that's really weird because most of human history, if any kind of magic was employed, it was employed to help fertilize the crops, the ground, so that we could have crops, we could have food. These things were done so that people could get pregnant and children could be born and countries could grow and empires could expand and kings could have heirs. And now we do the opposite. So things change, and Valentine's Day has likewise changed in many ways for many reasons. Let's go to the chat room really quick because there's a lot of great questions in here. I'm not sure where all of these are coming from. I assume most of them are coming from YouTube. But I saw somebody ask the question about why is it a month later in Japan for March? Why do they have what they call it White Day? Why do they do that? Well, part of it has to do with chocolate companies. It's usually based around the chocolate companies. That's what Valentine's Day is today. In the 50s and 60s, chocolate companies wanted to promote Valentine's Day. And in doing this in Japan, you have a totally different culture compared to the West. Early advertisements, this is post-World War II, so early advertisements encouraged women to confess their love by giving chocolate to men. And it became really popular, became a social custom. And it, because of, chocolate companies wanting to sell chocolate, it sort of was pushed and promoted and expanded to coworkers and friends. So it's not always romantic. And it sort of caught on as a tradition. And the reason that women give men the chocolate, or obligation chocolate as it's called in English, well, maybe that's technically what the men give back, but I think they still call this giri choco or something to that. I think it's something like that. So they give the chocolate because the women were the ones that were targeted by the advertising. Because in Japan, with the history of the culture, the way that things have been here, A lot of people might see it as, this is a separate show, but a lot of people might see it as being unequal between men and women. But traditionally, a man would work and a woman would get all of his paycheck and he would get an allowance. So is that considered, by the same standards, is that unfair? I hate these arguments. I think that they're dumb. I think that they're stupid. So anyway, women would be targeted by these ads. Women are more emotional. Women put more effort into beauty and to attract men. So this is, in Japanese society, chocolate companies targeted women. It became a social norm, and men didn't give anything back, despite the fact that Japan has a long history of omiyage and gift giving, the obligation gifts, which can become burdensome. In the 70s, late 70s into the 80s, once again, chocolate candy companies said, well, we're missing half of the market here. Like we're losing out on half of the market here. So candy companies created White Day as a reply day. So the idea is that men should return the gift to women. I've always thought it was weird because, again, they have that omiyage culture. They have that gift-giving culture. And I've always thought it was weird that that candy companies had to create a day for men to give something back. I didn't really fully understand why men wouldn't automatically give something back, especially if it's like a coworker thing. But I guess that's how things just change and they evolve over time. Anyway, to answer the question in the chat, that's why it was primarily, you'd call it commercialization, but it was primarily candy companies that created this celebration, this gift giving of chocolate and White Day in Japan. And, historically, if we were to go 100 years into the future and look back on why the Japanese have this tradition, or 200 years or 300 years in the future, we might not, even today, unless you live here, you study the culture, people probably don't know much about that tradition. So if 200, 300, 400 years, you look back and you might think that's backwards or it's weird, or why would they do something like that? And it's pretty much the same thing when you hear about Lupercalia. People call it evil. It's like it's backwards and like, oh my God, they're hitting women with animal strips dipped in blood. That's so barbaric. But like with many things that are out of context, women went out of their way to be struck with the animal hide dipped in blood. Why? Because they wanted to get pregnant, because they wanted to contribute to society, because they had a role to play. And I frankly don't see it any different than people going to a church and passing around vials of grape juice and saying, this is the blood of God, I'm going to drink his blood. I don't really think it's any different than that. Actually, it might be a little different in the sense that I consider communion to be kind of, you're drinking, it's vampirism. You're drinking the blood of a deity. It might be a little bit more than vampirism in a sense, because it's not it's not an immortal drinking human blood. It's a human drinking immortal blood. So I kind of think it's similar. It's like vampirism, but it's kind of reversed. And in the case of Lupercalia, with these strips of hide and the blood that they're dipped in, they're imparting fertility. They're imparting life. Blood is the life force, has the life force. That's told in the Bible, right? It's a universal theme throughout most cultures. So they're just imparting this to the women. The women wanted to be hit with the strips. I also find it interesting that the feminist kind of leftist political ideologies tend to see those types of things as like anti-women and like women need liberation And that's what the history of women was like, is they were hit with animal hide that was dipped in blood. But then again, like, these are the same kind of leftist liberal types that are like pro porn, and porn, because of Al Goldstein, has become nothing but like just beating women half to death. So I've always been confused about that, in the same way that I'm confused about the kind of right-leaning religious people that get upset about, like, oh my God, Valentine's Day, Lupercalia, it's such a demonic holiday, but then go to church and then like do shots of a God's blood. It's just kind of weird and hypocritical if we interpret these things to be all literal and then no context at all to it. Anyway, what exactly is the origin of all this stuff? Like, why, beyond the fertility? I mean, that's a big part of it, but like, what is the origin of all this stuff? What does it actually mean? And why do we do these things? Why do we tell these stories? We have to go back to last night's show. And last night's show, if you missed it, it was I thought, a really good show. And it is what I want the secret teachings to really be, more than any other topic. I want that to really be the focus of the show going forward, because I can't control the paranoid schizophrenia, conspiracy land, nonsense, mumbo jumbo trash on the internet, but I can at least produce content that is very based in reality. And I can produce and create something that is academic to some extent, to some level. So I really want to focus on this stuff like metaphors and myths and symbols. That's my specialty. They say, write what you know. Well, I'm going to talk about what I know. Let's look at what a metaphor is. A metaphor is a figure of speech. We talked about this last night. We talked about the story of Icarus, and Icarus flying too close to the sun, and the wax and the feathers that comprised the wings of Icarus so that he could escape the island of Crete. It melted and he fell into the ocean. Now, that didn't actually literally happen, but if you read the story as a metaphor, the metaphor is that the sun is something you don't want to fly too close to, that the sun can burn you as much as it can provide warmth and life, and that making those wings out of wax and out of feathers, pushing the boundaries of the natural world, going beyond, being a little bit too ambitious, can lead to your ruin. That there's a breaking point. The waters that he falls into are illusion, and so on and so forth. If you missed last night's show, it's in the archive. You can take a listen to it. It's only an hour too. It's a compressed show, so it's only an hour. It's pretty simple listen. So that's a metaphor. An allegory, I think most people know what an allegory is. An allegory is like Plato's cave, right? There are people in the cave. They see shadows on the wall. They think that's real. Somebody escapes the cave. They go outside. They come back. They say, this is not real. There's an outside of the cave, and it's symbolic of the skull and the body and consciousness and all that, as much as it is, or has become, a story, that an allegory that explains modern society. People are watching the shadows on the wall. That's an allegory. A parable, something that Jesus spoke about and spoke in many times in the Bible. This is described in the book of Matthew. A parable is like it's a lesson. So King Midas, right? He wants to have everything he touches turned into gold. And then his food turns into gold and he can't eat. And it's a lesson. The prodigal son is another parable. I think the mustard seed. Well, there's a lot of different seed parables, but the mustard seed one in particular, that's a parable. And allegories can be metaphors, and metaphors can kind of be allegories, and parables kind of fall into the mix. And it's not so important to really define explicitly like what each one is if we're talking about individual stories. What's important to understand is that myths, yeah, they're not necessarily real. They can be based on real places or real events or real people. But metaphors and myths and allegories, they're ways that we convey messages. They're ways that we teach lessons. They're ways that we tell stories. They're also ways, especially myth, in which we conceal scientific information and pass it down to future generations. And there's something of all of this found in Valentine's Day. Because I don't believe, I mean, there may have been a few people who thought this, but I don't think that the women that were being hit with these hides of animals dipped in blood really believed that they were going to receive like some kind of unseen etheric fertility energy or essence or magic. Maybe they did, but I mean, some of them probably certainly did. But I think it's more the symbolic act, which is what magic is. And especially if we're going back to a magical point of human history where the gods were still very much alive and present and you could interact with them, then it's the act itself. It's not so much that you're, when you're praying, talking to a deity in the clouds per se. You're talking to yourself. You're making a plan for yourself. You're like the New Age commentary goes, you're holding space for yourself. You know, you're putting the idea out there. You're manifesting your own reality. That is essentially the idea of what prayer is, and it's kind of the idea behind imparting it's sympathetic magic. You're imparting the qualities of an animal, the qualities of blood, onto both women and to crops. I'm sure some guy probably grabbed one of the strips of hide and dipped it in blood and smacked his own balls with it too, because you make sure that you're fertile. And that's what's important, especially when you don't have Planned Parenthood on every block. And to some extent, you know, birth is still, it's not even today, it's a quote miracle, but birth is not maybe fully understood in terms of like the cellular scientific. I mean, that's arguable because there's evidence historically that they did fully understand exactly even the microscopic nature of it all, but it's still magical, and that's what the marriage is all about. Not just the marriage between man and woman, but the marriage between earth and sky, the marriage between parents and children, the marriage between opposites or lesser and greaters. See, this is stuff that you saw at the Super Bowl, right? This is stuff that you saw at the Olympics. This is stuff you saw at the Turning Point USA show. If you missed our shows from this week, we did an analysis of the marriage that was shown at the halftime show of the Super Bowl, the Olympic opening ceremony, where you have a sacred marriage under the torch or under the cauldron that the torch was lighting. And you had a sacred marriage in the TPUSA halftime show. And what that sacred marriage represents is the coming together, the merging, not so much of opposites, but the merging of energies, the masculine and feminine energies, the whole essence of reality and existence, the sun and the moon, the sky and the earth, the moon and the water, the sun and the soil, masculine and feminine, feminine and masculine, male and female, female and male, man and woman, coming together and uniting, producing a third. That is an image that you see repeatedly because it is not even really an occult image. It's just like, it's an image of functioning societies. They promote family and promote marriage, but marriage is more than just a physical and more than even just at least in my perspective, marriage often gets associated with religion, right? It's like, it's sex is God's gift and God brings man and woman together. I mean, how does that work? I don't understand. How does that work in conservative societies that are not religious? Like, how does that work here in Japan? How does that work in Japan where less than 1% of the country is Christian, and yet they have a very strong cultural emphasis that is placed traditionally on marriage, on the masculinity of men, on the femininity of women, especially the femininity of women, and the importance of children. How do you get that in a society that doesn't have Jesus? How do you get that in a society that doesn't have the Bible? How do you get that in a society that's largely, from a Western perspective, considered atheist, even though that's the furthest thing from the truth? So it's not just in religious societies or Christian societies where marriage is important, because considering the fact that a lot of Christians would view the halftime show as being satanic or demonic, if it's satanic or demonic, then why are they showing you a marriage? Why is that the central, like literally the central theme that was at center field? It was one of the central images of the halftime show. And then just naturally at the Olympics, you get that merging of opposites. You get that sacred marriage, the alchemical marriage, the bringing of two things together, the production of a third of a new thing. And that is what Valentine's Day is all about. Because on top of having the fertility imparted through the blood and through the animal, the ability to conceive and to have a child, then there was the actual physical process of that. And the Romans, they probably had orgies, but generally speaking, the idea of Valentine's Day was to impart that fertility magic, to impart the essence of the animal and of the life force that's in the blood, to impart that. And then husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends would do their thing, and it's a fertility ritual. But they would also be imparted to the crops, because when the sun penetrates the ground and it is fertilized and there are crops that grow, 9 months later there's a harvest, there's a strong relationship between the agricultural traditions and the societal traditions, families and children, etc. What we're dealing with here is something that is both literal and figurative. It's metaphoric, it's allegoric. There's parables to be extracted from these stories, and there's parables to be extracted from Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day is also not just and Lupercalia is not just a Roman tradition. And furthermore, you ever watch that TV show Sabrina? The new one. It's really dark. I watched maybe 3-4 episodes of it, and I tuned out. But I remember finding, just kind of randomly one time, one of the later episodes, they had an episode where they had like a Valentine's Day, and it was really dark, and it was Lupercalia, and they had a satanic Lupercalia. But see, the thing is, again, where the weird hypocrisies and the weird contradictions come into play, if Lupercalia were truly evil or satanic or whatever you choose to call it, why exactly would Satanists be trying to get pregnant and have children? Because traditionally, the idea is that Satanism is opposition. And so opposition to the natural order would be aborting children, not birthing them. Why would Satanists, or whatever you choose to call them in modern terminology, why would Satanists be trying to get pregnant? Why would Satanists be trying to impart the essence of God, fertility, new life, children? Well, it's because they're not Satanists. That's why. It's because they're not worshiping the devil. That's why. It's because when you look at the idea of the horns, like devil horns, right? Or rock on. You look at the idea of the horns, someone's going to clip that and say, oh my God, he worships the devil. Here, I'll get within the horns, my Enzo Norin behind me. I'll get within the horns, and then they'll do the devil horns. Oh my God, he's a devil worshiper. So the devil horns, or whatever you want to call them, I think most people know that they come from Pan, a goat god, of fertility, right? So fertility, this is where you get the idea of being horny. The horn god, Cernunnos, the horn god, there's many of them. The horn god, even Baal. Baal's a fertility god. Take me out to the ball game. Baal is a fertility god. Talak is a fertility god. Zeus is not a fertility god per se, but fertility is part of his power, his magic. Zeus liked to bang, as you know in the myths. So anyway, you have this contradiction with Satanism. I don't know if it comes from religion or what it is, but like everything is demonic and evil. That's not part of some idealized perception of the world. If it were satanic or evil, like why would they be birthing children? Why would people be trying to get pregnant? Because it's about fertility. It's about new life. It's about creating something new. It's about making sure the species survives. It's about making sure that we have food. It's about making sure that a king has an heir. It's about a lot of different things. And those things have very little to do with our modern contemporary conceptions of good versus evil or God versus the devil. And as I just explained a moment ago, over here in Japan, they don't really have the Bible and Jesus. So why do they push marriage and families? Because it's a human thing. It's a universal thing. It is not confined to a particular religious group or country. And so from a religious or a Christian point of view, you like children, right? You're not pro-abortion. You like kids. Suppose it depends on what denomination. If you're Catholic, you might like kids in a different way. At least you support people who like kids in a different way. Although if you're Baptist too, they also like to touch kids. They really like touching kids in the Baptist churches in the South. A lot of churches like touching kids. You could say, well, that's the evil infiltrating the good and they're corrupting the good. Okay, anyway, the point is, but you're not pro-abortion, right? Like you want people to have children and families. That's no different than the so-called pagan world where they wanted people to have children and families. It's the same thing because it's universal. And so you find that in the Christian world, you find that in Christendom, you find that in the pagan world, you find that in infamous pagan Rome, you find that in atheistic, although they're not atheistic, Japan. They say atheistic because they don't subscribe to Western definitions of religion, but ultimately Japan is more spiritual than the Western world. Much of the East is more spiritual than the West world. They see spirits in everything. Everything has a spirit. It's animistic in a way. So it's definitely not atheistic. Their conception of God is Musubi. It means the unification of all things, to be bound, to have connection to everything, which is, that's kind of the Latin word religare. It means to be bound. And that's what religion is. It binds you, but it binds you hopefully to God. It's the same thing in Arabic. It doesn't matter if it's Japanese or if it's Chinese or if it's Arabic or if it's English or Latin. All these words really come from the same place. They come from the human being. They come from the mind. They come from human consciousness. They come from the way that we see the world and the way that we interact and what we do. And what we do is we do the same thing, no matter where we are in the world. No matter if you're Christian, you want families and kids. You're a pagan, you want families and kids. Or you're a, quote, atheistic Asian and you still want family. You want families and kids. The Chinese, even though they have a tyrannical government, they still promote families and kids. So it doesn't really make any sense to label this stuff demonic or satanic or evil or whatever it is that we choose to call it. The Queen of Hearts tonight, the Valentine's Day show. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Let's look at the history of some of these traditions and the history of some of these stories. that's about 45 minutes just on my opening thoughts. But I do want to, before we go into the main body of the show, I do want to go to the chat room, and I want to see if we have any questions or additional comments, and we'll spend a few minutes on this here. We'll go back to the very start tonight. Edward Preston is here. Chopticon is here. Oh, we got our good friend Kike Roach in the chat there. Rita Moore. What a horrible name. I don't think it's that horrible of a name. Rita Moore is here. Evan Kelly is here. Tim Curley is here. Diane Perry is here. Cyber Sicilian is here as well. Deborah is here. Darren Bird is here. Hello, Darren. I hope that you're enjoying the show tonight. Darren said, can't wait for this one. Queen of Hearts. Mad Maddie is here. Hello, Mad Maddie. Thank you for joining us in the chat tonight. Crazy is here. And we also have some long names in the chat. Psilocybin Satmi. Hello, Psilocybin in the chat. It is going well tonight. Thank you for asking. We also have Boomer Sooner is here. Boomer Sooner said, well, that would coming from Boomer Sooner. He says, your face is a kid. Yeah, I guess so, from Boomer Sooner. I'm always a kid. You're always a kid to people that are your senior. Joe, is this Joe or no, Jay? Jay is also here. Hello, Jay. Let's go. I bought a copy of the symbolic dictionary you mentioned. I'm eager to deep dive into my own research. Yes, the J.E. Surlott Dictionary of Symbols. That is a really good book. Very cheap too. And that is something that if you you could just read that like a novel. You'll learn a lot in alphabetical order. Johnny, hello, Johnny. Thank you for joining us in the chat. Antonio is also here. Jackie is here. Yeah, Jackie, of course, I have handlers. That's right. Handlers that cut my videos into 20 seconds so you don't get the truth. Johnny said, I listened to Ryan's 6-hour podcast on Epstein. Really good. Yeah, that was a 2-part show. I've tried to pull together some of the themed shows and put them up in the archive as best ofs. Let's see what else we have in the chat. We also have King Sweet is here. Hello, King Sweet. Oh, and Joe Ryder. Joe's the one that asked about the Valentine's Day and the White Day. So I hope that answers your question. Dab21 is here. Oh, there's Nate is also here. Night Watch Innate. Nate is here. Hello, Nate. Thank you for joining us in the chat. It looks like Nate's been pretty active in here talking about communion. Nate said it's a metaphor, just like communion isn't the literal body of Christ. Such questions led to the Reformation. But we're talking Mystery Babylon here, so same, hence the natural marriage of the pagan feast days with the Roman ones. Much of the world still celebrates today. Agreed, we might have a slightly different interpretation of the pagan and Roman element of it, but agreed otherwise. Hello, Mark. Thank you for joining us, Mark Martin. I think Mark's here quite often. I see Rebecca is also here. Hello, Rebecca. Jello Putin is here. Hello, Jello. Mistos Dokos. By the way, Mistos Dokos, I got your 2 books out. I sent you an email. Your books are on the way. In fact, anybody who ordered a copy of Kosher Conspiracy, your books are on the way. They should arrive by the end of February, and you should have already received your digital copies of that book. Cheryl is also here. Hello, Cheryl. Thank you for joining us in the chat tonight. Cheryl is listening in, is that Louisville, Texas. Thanks for joining us from I think it's still a great state, the great state of Texas. Cool channel name is here. John O is here. Hello, John. Thank you for joining us. And I hope I didn't miss anybody, but I think that's the main folks that are chatting in the chat room on YouTube, X, Facebook, etc. Okay, let's get into the specifics of Valentine's Day. Let's look at the Lupercalia festival. If you want to type that in and learn about it, read about it, it's Lupercalia, Lupercalia. And it is a festival like most festivals, most traditional festivals, that is 3 days. It's not a single day. And the chocolate company should really get on this because they could capitalize on 3 Valentine's days, 3 days of chocolate and flower giving. I'm waiting for the chocolate companies, to the candy companies to make that move, but they haven't done so yet. Lupercalia is a 3-day festival. Christmas is traditionally a multi-day festival as well. So is Halloween. Halloween's a 3-day festival. Some of those traditions, in terms of the length of the festival, were still being practiced. They were preserved even in the 1800s from stuff that I've read, books that I've read. Only recently, many of these holy days have been reduced to a single day. So Lupercalia typically took place around the 13th, 14th, and 15th of what we call February. And it was a purification festival as much as it was a fertility festival. Now, purification served several different masters. The first one was you're purifying your home. We call this spring cleaning, right? You're purifying your home. You're purifying the body that you live in, which is a smaller aspect of the larger society as a whole, and conceptually and physically. So you're cleaning out your home, that body, you're cleaning out the body of society, cleaning up the streets, and then you're also purifying yourself. So you're cleaning the physical body, and you're washing away all of the dust of the house, the dust of the body, if you will. You are washing away all of the mud and the dirt, and you're making and you're creating a clean space. Cleanliness is next to godliness. You're creating a clean space for the new year. And then the fertility aspect in regard to purification comes into play, and you're also creating a clean space for your family. You're creating a clean space for this new life. And you're doing that by cleansing the body. And maybe if you couldn't get pregnant before, you have to cleanse out all the things that have prevented that from happening. And whether you believe it, literally, or if it's just a symbolic act, we all do things today that are similar to this. We might call them OCD. Got to make sure you turn the light switch on and off 3 times, or check the door to make sure it's locked, or the stove. We might call that OCD. A lot of people do stuff like that. We are not any different than the Romans that practiced Saturnalia or Lupercalia. We're not any different than that. We're the same human beings. Well, we might actually be dumber, but we're the same human beings. We still do things like this. So purification, cleansing, and preparing for the new year, and preparing for what is the new year symbolized as, even today, a baby, preparing for the new baby. Now, it was dedicated to Faunus, which is a goat god. And Faunus, because a goat is a symbol of fertility, this is the case in Russia as well. Faunus, as a goat, has this energy, this fertile energy. And if you can take something from Faunus and you can impart it to a human female, or to the crops, or to a human male, then you can hopefully impart the power to conceive, the power to grow, the power to produce. We call reproduction, call that sex and childbirth, and we call our vegetables and fruit produce. We're producing something out of the cornucopia of nature. Now, the god Faunus, even though Faunus is a goat, Faunus is not fully a goat per se. Like, there are depictions of Faunus, and there are statues of Faunus, which is, you get the word like fawn, where Faunus looks kind of like just a human, and he has horns. Now, this is really, really common in general throughout mythology. This is really common in general throughout the ancient world. The horns represent a lot of different things. They don't just represent fertility, like to be horny. The horns represent the masculine qualities of nature, like a buck deer. Those qualities of nature are the masculine qualities of a feminine world, because the natural world it's Isis. It is the domain of Demeter. I mean, Saturn might control time, but it is the domain of Demeter. And so when you read the story, let's say, it's one of my favorite myths. When you read the story of Persephone, it's a really good story. Persephone is abducted. She is kidnapped and she is taken to the underworld. And in this story, Persephone she symbolizes springtime, because when she's abducted, she's picking flowers, rearranging flowers. She is spring. She's abducted by Hades, god of the underworld. That's the time in which the green and the life and the warmth go underground. They're imprisoned in Hades. Hades comes up and abducts Persephone. And Demeter, her mother, the goddess of agriculture, is devastated. So she goes and searches for her daughter. And in the process of doing that, she neglects the earth, and the earth, crops die, plants wither. Very few things are left to survive except for greens, evergreens. And that's why we use those today in our modern Christmas traditions, our modern winter solstice traditions. Eventually, Zeus intervenes and orders Hades to release Persephone. Zeus is the divine order, and the divine order of time and the divine order of the laws of nature dictate that after the fall and the winter, the spring will rise again. So Persephone comes back into the world, but she has eaten a pomegranate, or at least a couple of the seeds of a pomegranate, in the underworld. And if you know your pop culture and your fairy tales and your myths, then you get stuck in the underworld if you eat or consume food there. Now, she only ate a few of the seeds, so the deal that is struck is that she has to stay in the underworld for a portion of the year. The other portion of the year, she can roam free and pick her flowers. Now, clearly, what that story is describing is the spring and even part of the summer being dragged down into a time of dormancy, and then they are resurrected. Does that sound familiar? This is a universal story of how the seasons change. And as much as people relate the story of Jesus to the story of the Son and its resurrection, it's also the death and the resurrection of the natural world, both in the feminine form, in the case of Persephone, and then also in the case of Faunus, in the masculine form. And that masculine form has horns. You also might know Faunus just simply as the green man, the green god. That would be famously Osiris. The story of Osiris is similar to Persephone, the green god of agriculture, Osiris. He's not dragged down into Hades per se. He's a much more powerful god. So he is placed into a coffin. And in the coffin, he is prevented from fulfilling his role. Osiris cannot really be killed, but Osiris can be cut up into pieces. He can be dismembered. He can be scattered about. He can be, for a temporary amount of time, stunted. And so that's what Seth does. He prevents Osiris. He can't kill him, but he prevents him from doing his work. And when that happens, things die. We have the fall, we have the winter. But when Isis, his wife and sister, it's not ancestral, it's in that way. These are metaphors. His partner, the idea of a wife or a sister imparts like a direct, close relationship. That's what it means. So Isis puts Osiris, who has been chopped up into 14 pieces, back together and cannot find the 14th piece, which is the phallus, the penis. Talking about fertility rituals here. So she fashions one out of beeswax, or she fashions one out of gold, and she places it onto Osiris. The Immaculate Conception, she gets on the phallus, it ejaculates, she gets pregnant, she gives birth to a savior. That savior, that light, avenges the dark, or avenges the death of Osiris, avenges his father, and brings light back to a dark world. And when that happens, Osiris is resurrected. Does that story sound familiar? This is an African Egyptian story. The other one was a Greek, but also a Roman story. There's equivalents to both. Roman and Greek are obviously very, very similar in terms of their myths, but both of them are telling stories about nature, not just agriculture, like human agriculture and growing crops, but just nature in general and this changing of the seasons. So Osiris is reborn, and Osiris is often shown in green because he is vegetation. Osiris sometimes has horns. He is the masculine force of nature. But if it wouldn't be for Isis, he would not have been born, nor would he have been reborn. And this is what it means if you read Revelation. And in Revelation, it talks about the end of the world. Well, that's what this is. This is the end of the world. The end of the world is the end of the year. And once the cold subsides and once the darkness subsides and the days get longer and days get warmer, the world is resurrected. And this is something that is concealed in myths, metaphors, religions, etc., all around the world. I really genuinely do not understand why, from a Christian point of view, I know we have so many Christian listeners, someone genuinely explain this to me. I don't understand why it cannot be accepted that these stories are confirming the Jesus story, but they're not confirming it as literal. They're confirming it as a metaphor. I don't understand. Can someone please explain this to me? Genuinely. I'm not being combative. I'm not being sarcastic. I really don't understand why all of these stories from all over the world, which confirm the Jesus story, but they don't confirm it in the way, I guess, that people might assume, or what doesn't confirm the literalism of the belief. It confirms the metaphorical nature of it. I don't get that. And faith is not an adequate response. That is not an adequate answer. I just have faith. No, you're ignoring the facts. You're ignoring the beyond overwhelming evidence that we're all talking about the same thing, and that should confirm our beliefs collectively, and we should go on understanding. We should live with the understanding that this is a human thing. This is a natural thing. I think that it's kind of ironic. I think that should prevent conflict, but I feel like it does the opposite, because I know just simply genuinely asking, I'm being so genuinely asking that question, I know is enough to create conflict. So I suppose it's a non-starter, or I suppose it's a question that maybe just shouldn't be asked. You know, the idea of the woman giving birth to a savior who crushes the head of a serpent. You ever heard that story? If you're Christian, I know that you know that story. The head of the serpent is crushed by the woman, or by the savior that she gives birth to. The seed of the woman. That's the story of Osiris. That's the story of Isis. That's the story of Demeter. That's the story of Persephone. That's the story of all the fertility gods. That's the story of all of the gods of weather, the gods of nature in every form. Here's the biblical verse, Genesis 3:15, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. And indeed, I sound like Ramtha now. Indeed, Osiris comes back to life, and his son, Horus, crushes the skull of darkness that set in when Osiris was placed into that coffin. Now, that story also, just like Valentine's Day, Lupercalia is a fertility ritual, a purification ritual for the house, for your community, for the body. It serves different roles: fertility for the body, but fertility also for the crops, for the land. In the same way, Osiris is not just the green man, the masculine qualities of nature. Osiris is also the soul, and the soul of the crops, the soul of the world, in a sense. He's the soul of the individual, because the soul of the individual soul is placed into a body. That's what this is. That's what all this is. That's the coffin. Placed into the coffin. You can't kill it. It's even modern science agrees with that, right? It's the idea that you can only transfer energy. You can't destroy it. So the soul can't be destroyed. Osiris can't be killed. He's a god. You place the soul into the body. And that body, also in tradition, you have this story of Moses. You have this story of a king of Akkad. I think it was Sargon. The story is in Hindu occultism. They place the baby into the basket. And what is that except Osiris placed into the coffin? In fact, the Osiris myth, which is very, very old, I'm pretty sure it's like not just the story itself is obviously beyond ancient, but I'm saying the idea of Osiris himself, like that particular story, is, I'm assuming, like with that deity, far predates Egypt. In fact, Osiris is the Greek name. It's like Isis is the Greek name. It's not even the Egyptian name. Osiris's real name is, I think it's written in hieroglyphics, like I think it's pronounced Asar, or Usir. There's a bunch of different spellings. WSJR. It's transliterated as Asar, Asir, Asir, Viser, Usir, Usair, like maybe sire. It basically means powerful, the mighty one. It means the Lord. which is the same meaning that's what Baal is. Baal is an honorific, and Baal is a fertility god. And Baal, of course, can be taken and turned into something other than fertility, like when the Jews would sacrifice babies to him. Then you're inverting the meaning of that fertility deity. In the same way that Isis, her real name is Aset. And when I say real, I just mean in Egypt. Isis is more of I believe that's her Greek name. Isis or Isis. She's known as the queen of the throne, queen of this world. Her offspring will crush the head of the serpent. And it is true. Horus and Osiris crush the head of the serpent. And this is what these myths are, what we, whether we recognize it or not, it's what we all experience on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. We watch the changing of the seasons. We watch the sun be rebirthed from the earth, like visibly, physically. The sun starts to rise. That bloody red sky. Hey, the Japanese flag with the red dot on it, the white pure background. The red, yellow, orangish sun, it rises. And as the sun rises, it brings light and life back to the world. You've heard this over and over and over again. But it's the Savior. It is the offspring, as we just read in Genesis. It is the offspring that will crush the darkness, that crushes the cold. And it's not just the sun, it's also the plants and the soil. It's also the water that's been turned into ice in the winter. It is resurrected and reborn when the water starts to flow again. This is something that also is occurring internally. It's something that you can, like, I can feel it right now in my hands. My apartment is very, very cold. And my hands have, I think, been frozen since November. It's very, very cold. And I know that dry, cold feeling when the springtime comes and it gets warm, it's not going to feel like this anymore. You know, when you're cold all the time and you sit in front of a heater, or you got a blanket on, or whatever the case is. We have a kotatsu here that I sit under at night, and you thaw. It physically happens to humans as much as it does to the natural world. It happens to everybody. So all of these stories are tied into agriculture. They're also tied into the general changing of the seasons. They're tied into the movement of the sun, the movement of the planet, the movement of the stars. So this ties in with math and geometry and physics, and those things we call them science today, but that's what these myths were talking about. They were scientific explanations, and they were spiritual explanations. In the case of Osiris, put in a case, this is also the human, the soul, the real you, the real true human, placed into a body that we call human. And it's also the seed of nature going dormant temporarily. And then once the ground falls, it comes back to life. I don't think that any of this is insulting. I feel like all of this is confirmation of the Christian story. I think this is all confirmation of the Christian narrative, isn't it? Of the Jesus narrative, at the very least. I think it is. All of this is also intimately connected to Valentine's Day. It's all very intimately connected to the purpose, which is fertility, and fertility in more ways than one. So we have a lot of stories. It's not just Osiris. It's not just Lupercalia. We also have the story of Attis. And Attis is a story that doesn't get told enough. Attis is a Phrygian, Anatolian vegetation god associated with seasonal rebirth. He is the brother and the husband of Cybele. Cybele is another goddess who I think gets left out of the conversation on these things quite often. The story is that Attis died. In some versions of the story, he dies under a pine tree. So he dies under a tree like Buddha is enlightened under the tree, Odin is crucified on the tree, Indra is crucified on what appears to be wood. There are some stories in Egypt that there are crucifixions on, or people are like Set is tied to like a pillar or tied to like a pole. And I mean, in a sense, that's what Osiris is crucified to or encased in, because the coffin is when it's placed on the water, and all those stories of the coffin on the water, Moses, and also in the Hindu mysteries, what that is the river of life, like right, the Milky Way connecting to the Nile River, etc., or the Amazon even. So when that coffin goes down the river, there's a tree that it gets stuck under, a tree that's grown on the banks of a river. I think it's a tamarisk tree, and the roots grow around the coffin. The tree is eventually cut down, it's turned into a pillar in the palace of a foreign king. So Osiris is literally, he's in the coffin, and he's inside of the tree, inside of the coffin, and then that tree is cut down, it's turned into a pillar, and the pillar is raised in the royal household. Sounds like Moses. He's in a basket on the water, and then he is raised in a royal household. And then Osiris eventually rebels and let my people go. He frees his people who are subject to the changing of the seasons, his people that are subject to the lack of food, his people that are subject to the tyranny of Set or Typhon. And Osiris is raised in the temple, in the palace. Isis frees him, brings him back to life, gives birth to a savior, and then they save their people. That's right. The whole story about Jews in Egypt, that's also largely a metaphor. Because the people that built the pyramids, and this is mainstream now, the people that built the pyramids were skilled workers. They were not slaves in any sense of the word. They were paid in spices and oils. They were skilled laborers. They didn't beat slaves to build the pyramids. That is an archaic and dirty little historical lie. So raised in the temple like Moses, goes on to rebel and free his people. I mean, Osiris is the prototype for Moses. Some even think that Moses is Akhenaten, I think is the theory. I interviewed one of the people, a woman who wrote a book on that before she passed away. One of the people that was a big proponent of that theory, Charya S. or D.M. Murdoch. She wrote some really interesting books. That woman was a scholar. So that story is so fascinating. I didn't mean to get caught up with that story with Osiris, but going back to it again, it's important to have that as a base. It's one of my favorite myths, but it's important to have that as a base, because when we look at Attis, he was killed, or some stories, self-castration. There's different versions of the story. So he self-sacrificed himself under a pine tree. Buddha under a tree, Odin, Osiris in the chest, in the tree, etc. And so after that, he was reborn. And Attis as a god symbolizes the vegetation cycles. His festival was in March, closer to the spring equinox than Imbolc. His festival's in March, and it just so happens to fall on the spring equinox. And it marks the death of winter and the birth of the spring. It's really elementary. It's really simple. Spring equinox, we move officially into the spring. The winter is dead. The witch is dead. The Wicked Witch is dead. We move into the spring. And as we move into the spring, the days get longer and warmer, and we have gods that symbolize that. It's very simple. And, even if you think about Alice in Wonderland or The Wizard of Oz or any of these other fairy tales, this stuff is concealed in them too. Think about The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch. Which direction is she from? She's the Wicked Witch of the West. And that's where the sun goes to die. When the Wicked Witch is dead, ding dong, the witch is dead. The Wicked Witch, the Wicked Witch. Once the witch is dead, the sun rises again in the east. It's in everything. It is everything. If it wouldn't be for these things, we wouldn't be alive. It's everything. You got to read The Golden Bow. That book is, I would actually recommend, I think, reading The Secret Teachings of All Ages and then The Golden Bow. You really need to read Hall before you read Fraser. I think it's a little bit more, not that Hall, of course, isn't academic, but you really have to understand basic stuff before you read Fraser, or it's going to be very confusing. He does not, maybe it's just the writing style. He does not write like Hall's easy to read. Fraser's much more difficult to read, in my opinion. Maybe you don't think that. Anyway, this was on the 22nd, roughly, the spring equinox. This is known as the Day of Blood. The Day of Blood was the day in which Attis is resurrected, the blood of birth, as well as the blood of his death by choice. He sacrificed himself in the how do you not see the comparison? I don't get this. He sacrificed himself and crucified him, allowed himself to be crucified, and then his blood brought life back to it's the same story. And the story of Attis and the story of Cybele is a very, very old story. It is not a modern contemporary story. The story is like all of the myths. It's universal. Officially that story, if you look it up, that story is dated, the Attis story, like the actual creation of the story. And things don't just appear overnight, right? They take a long time to develop. That story is dated to 1200 BC. That's a long time ago. 1200 BC. That's 1,200 years before the Jesus story. Same story. Same story. We also have in Mesopotamia, Dumuzi or Tammuz or Dumuzi, the shepherd god, so the shepherd of his people, consort of Inanna and Ishtar. Tammuz represents, like Attis, vegetation, seasonal fertility. The myths of Tammuz, like Persephone, describe his descent into the underworld and his cyclical return, like with all the others we've talked about so far. He dies and he is resurrected. The story of Adonis, same thing. Adonis is a god of beauty and desire, beloved by Aphrodite. He's killed by a boar, which, if I remember correctly, I think that there's a direct connection between the story of the boar that kills Adonis and I think it's, I'd have to look it up. Let me go to my book, Occult Arcana, and let me see if I can find it. The boar. It's another myth. I might not be able to find it. This book is so big, it takes so long to load. If you want to get a copy of Occult Arcana, tstradio.info. It's like 600. It's like a ream of computer paper. It's a physically large book. It's 600 and something pages of all of this stuff. Let's see if I think, oh, you know what it is? I think it's in one of the myths, just off the top of my head, if I can remember this correctly. I think it is one of the, I think it's Buddha in one of the stories. Yeah, there's a myth that Buddha is actually killed by a boar. I think it's Buddha. Wild boar. Anyway, yes, there's the boar because the boar represents the winter time in certain forms of mythology or in certain symbolic analysis or interpretations. The boar represents the winter. So he's killed by a boar, killed by the winter, goes to the underworld. And the blood that falls to the ground when Adonis is killed causes flowers to rise up. It's no different than the story of Mithra slaying the bull and the bull's blood falling to the ground and then flowers rising up. Same thing with Kali with her tongue out, licking up the blood of the demon that she kills to prevent demons from being birthed. So when the blood of a demon falls to the ground, it creates more demons. When the blood of a god falls to the ground, or a very beautiful god, nature, when that falls to the ground, it produces beautiful flowers. This is another one of those things like with that paganism phobia that people have. Oh my God, paganism. Oh my. Well, then why were the pagans trying to create new life? They weren't trying to prevent, they weren't aborting, they were trying to create new life. Like that's don't Christians agree with that? Now, it's the same thing with Kali, because like, oh, Kali's evil, but okay, then why does Kali try to prevent Raktabija from birthing, giving birth to more demons? Like, why would a demon like Kali try to prevent the birth of more demons? None of it ever makes any make sense. None of it makes any sense because Kali doesn't represent evil. Kali looks evil, but she looks evil because she has a role to fulfill that requires her to look and act a certain way. And it's kind of ironic because the people that might label her evil are the same ones that I know because I was raised in that by those people. They're the same ones that they need like a clear distinction between good and evil. Like the devil has a red skin and Jesus glows white and has a halo, and it's like Star Wars. It's very clear who the good guy and who the bad guy is. And it is also very clear who the good guy and who the bad guy is in Hinduism too, in the Hindu myths. But, that's a heathen religion that has, if it wouldn't be for Christianity, Hinduism wouldn't be a religion, not the reverse. Then we have the festival of, I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's Spintermatij or something like that. It's an ancient Persian religion. And it honored Spenta Armati. Somebody correct me on that if I don't have the pronunciation wrong. But Spenta, I know that's correct. Armiti, I think that's, maybe it's like Almighty, Armiti. Spenta Armiti, the spirit of the earth. The spirit of the earth, a lot less personalized than some of these other stories we're talking about. It represents the feminine nature of the earth and the earth's fertility. And it was observed in the late winter as the spring approached. So it's basically the Persian Imbolc. And then we have Imbolc and we have Brigid. And this is an early February festival. And I love the story of Brigid. I love the story for two reasons. Number one, it's a cool story. Number two, she has an interesting symbol. I'll show it to you here on the screen for those of you watching. Her symbol is the cross. Her symbol is the same symbol that the Christians use as a symbol of resurrection. I'm going to show you my Occult Arcana book here on the screen. You can see the cross of Bridget there on the right. And underneath of it, very interesting, I found this other image at a shrine in Japan. I found this at the Gold Sungate Shrine, which is a shrine that I think it's, if I remember, there's several shrines in this place that I went. It's very close to, if it might even be right in front of it, Myoto Iwa, which is one of the most iconic places in the world. It's one of the most iconic places in Japan, especially, but in the world, Myoto Iwa, which is the, again, sacred marriage. It's the merging of two rocks, a larger rock, a masculine rock, and a feminine rock. And here, so I don't have to switch back and forth between the book and the other internet tab I have open here. Let me do this. I will just not save the book, but I'll pull an image of Myoto Iwa into the book here so you can see it. That's what Myoto Iwa looks like. The marriage, it's the sacred marriage of the rocks. Sacred marriage. And in front of this sacred marriage of one of the most iconic places in the world, one of the three most iconic places in Japan, there's a shrine, a golden shrine, golden gate. And there's these little crosses that you get. I think it's like 300 yen, maybe 200 yen. It was maybe it was up to 500 yen, which is pretty expensive. So I think it was more like 300 yen. It's like $1.50 or something US. And you donate that and you get one of these little crosses. It looks very similar to the Bridget cross. It's basically just, in the case of the Bridget cross, it usually doesn't have a ring around it, but it's basically like a Celtic cross. And it's braided. I'm not exactly sure what they make it out of, but it's braided. And you take it and it's like a scapegoat. You place all the things that you want to cleanse yourself of. It's a purification symbol. You place that into the cross, and then you lift it off the ring and you place it onto another ring, and you leave that at the shrine. So it is a cross that is used to purify and cleanse the body and the mind, and it is found at a shrine, which is a golden gateway, the Sun Gate, into Myoto Iwa, which is the sacred marriage between these two large rocks or stones in the water. And as in the story of Osiris, as in the story of Moses, as in the story of King Sargon, as in the story of the Hindu mysteries and the little baskets that they would place in the water, the rocks appear to be floating on the water. They're in the water. Rocks, big, large rocks, just like pillars, just like trees, embody the essence of God. So you see a masculine and you see a feminine, and you see them united together in sacred marriage there in Japan. Now, I saw that, and I was quick with the camera. I took a bunch of pictures because it really spoke to me, because what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the sacred marriage of these rocks. I'm looking at the golden sun gate. I'm looking at crosses that purify and cleanse and provide you with a clear mind and a clear body, and a visual representation of that cleansing. And it shows you through the gateway, the path, the way. I'm looking at the path of Buddha. I'm looking at the path of Allah. I'm looking at the path of Christ. I'm looking at the pathway of the Tao. What I'm looking at is every religion, every, like, the core of every myth and metaphor and allegory, all the things just rolled into one. And these practices and these beliefs, like over here, are beyond pre-ancient. Beyond pre-ancient. Ultimately, they actually came out of China, and those came out of India. So it all goes back to India. The difference is India is a dump now, unless you're in the wealthy areas, and Japan's not. And Japan's it's been able to preserve these traditions for so long that you do have a very pure, uncontaminated, unpolluted form of the secret teachings. So you can see the Brigid cross there and the purifying cross in Shintoism. It's really interesting. Like, I am consistently not shocked, but I am consistently, my love of this stuff is consistently re-sparked every time I learn something like this. I just find it utterly fascinating. I find it so cool, to use the common tongue. It is utterly fascinating. And you might say, what does this have to do with Valentine's Day? Well, it has everything to do with Valentine's Day. That's what this all is. It's dying and it's resurrecting. It's fertility. That's what it's all about. Valentine's Day is a purification, spring cleaning ritual to clean out your house, your community, and your body, to prepare for the new year, which is often personified even today as a baby. And that baby is also something that hopefully families can physically bring into existence. And that's why you have the fertility rituals. You're cleaning out your body, you're preparing for this new life. And you're also imparting those same fertility energies, the same aspects and elements of fertility. You are applying those to crops, to the soil. You're applying them also to the air. You want to drive out wicked thoughts, heavy, dark, depressing thoughts, and you want to draw in the good. You tell the evil to get out. You ask the good to come in. The Lupercalia festival in Rome, the taking of animal hide and the smacking of the crops, the smacking of women with that animal hide. It might sound barbaric, it might sound downright satanic and demonic, but why did they do it? Satanism is opposed to God. It's opposition, it's adversarial. So why would Satanists, if that's what they were, they're not, but why would Satanists, if that's what they were, why would they do something to invoke new life, to draw in new life? That sounds like kind of the opposite of Satanism, at least in a conceptual sense, like what Satanism is. So you sacrifice a goat, sacrifice a dog, and you take the sexual vitality and the fertility of the goat, and you take in the case of a dog protects flocks, so it is linked to Faunus and other shepherd deities. You sacrifice them in the Lupercalia cave. The priests did. You would take the sacrificial knife, maybe akin to an athame, dip it in the blood. The blood was then wiped with wool dipped in milk, which is nurturing. And then the hides or the skin of the animals. Little strips would be taken, blood and milk. Sounds like spirit cooking. Exactly. That's what it is. And then you would take it and you would, instead of cooking for the spirits, you're cooking for the people and the crops. And then you would hit people. And people wanted to be struck with it because it was imparting those qualities. The goat hides imparting, and the goat skins imparting fertility, because they believed it increased fertility and it eased childbirth. I just imagine, like, if you got in a time machine and you went back to a Lupercalia festival and there's women running around, it's all part of a game, and they want to be struck by this goat hide dipped in the blood of a dog or a goat. And just like, that'd probably be a good sketch, like Christian missionaries or something with modern technology and modern knowledge, getting in time machines, going back to try to help spread the message of Christianity even more. And they go back to a Lupercalia festival because they think it's evil. And they try to stop the women from being hit with this goat hide. I don't understand why the point of it is fertility. It's to have children and to ease childbirth and to make way for a new generation. Like, isn't that kind of the Christian model? I don't understand why it would be considered evil. I don't see why it would be why it would be looked at in the way that it's looked at. I mean, how is it any really? Honestly, I would rather. I think if I would rather the blood ritual than modern in vitro fertilization. If you just think about it from the point of view, put yourself in position, the point of view of someone 500 years from now, and they look back, and maybe we still have the stories of Lupercalia, but the equivalency maybe is IVF. And they look back and say, these people were barbarians. In order to get pregnant, they would take genetic material and they would do something to it in a laboratory, and then they would implant it into the woman, and there was no sex and it was no organ. Like, they eliminated the orgasm, as Orwell wrote. Our scientists are at work on it now. I mean, it's the most sterile and most satanic thing that you could probably do. If there's no orgasmic spark, there's no intimate connection. I understand if you can't have a child, you really want to have a child, IVF, but like, from the point of view of future generations, that's going to look really evil. It's going to look really demonic, because you got to ask the question, is there, and maybe some of you are the byproduct of IVF. What I'm getting at here is, there's got to be something maybe at least perceptually, spiritually speaking, something different between the normal means of procreation and then the scientific means. You could even argue it's the same thing with children of rape as opposed to children of loving marriages and relationships. I'm just making the observation. And I think that IVF, which is cutting edge science, will be looked at in a very similar way to what Lupercalia is looked at today. I think that in some ways, it depends, I guess, on where the religious spirit of society goes. It might be looked at as, IVF might be looked at as demonic and satanic and evil. We already know that, the religious view on stem cells and all that. I mean, I guess it depends on where society goes. Now, the festival of Lupercalia, the blood ritual as it's referred to, why do we believe that blood has this power? And even these are non-Christians, and yet they believe the same thing. Because once again, universally, blood has always carried the life force. Anywhere you go in the world, blood carries the life force. Blood is cleansing. I mean, you can just get that from war too, right? You got an enemy, they've been raiding your town or your village or whatever, and you kill them and you spill their blood and you purify and cleanse the land and get rid of the evil. I mean, it might have come from that. Blood is also present at birth, so it's cleansing and purifying, and it brings new life into the world. Blood is also seen when the sun is born, that reddish orange, bloody look in the sky. You see that as the seasons change. And that blood is also the blood of the spring being born. Springtime being born. Bringing the world back. Bringing the sun back. It's the day of blood of Attis. Dies Sanguinis. I don't know how to pronounce it. And it's so strange to me, but I get it. Dominant cultures, dominant practices take over. They become dominant, and then they rewrite everybody else is wrong, we're right. Someone will do that to Christianity at some point. Someone will do that to Islam at some point, probably in 500 years, maybe 1,000 years. They're wrong, everybody else is. I mean, it's already happening to Christianity in the U.S. It's already happening. It's all anti-Semitic, and the Bible should be banned. You should be in jail for being a Christian. It's already happening. So enjoy it while it lasts before the transition is complete. That's what Valentine's Day is. And there's a lot that you can extract from it and pull out of it that can take you down other roads, other things to learn about and to read about. I love this stuff because, I know that the average person, the average human being, and I'm a human being too, so I know this because I used to be more or less like this. We're trying to, we find things interesting that, like, we listen to things, we watch things, if we find them interesting, usually because it resonates with us and usually with our beliefs. It resonates with what we want to believe, or maybe more importantly, what we don't want to believe. So I understand that, I get that. But I want to make it clear that for me, it's not really about what I believe or what I don't believe. I just like learning about where things come from. I just like learning about what the meaning of things are. And I like learning about how those things can help us to find similarities and understand those similarities, and therefore find a more level ground to come to agreements on between people and groups. I think that's really, really important. Although that might be idealistic, because in trying to do that, oftentimes what happens is you create conflict. Unintentionally, you create a lot of conflict. Yes, Malorcas in the chat. It is about gaining a new understanding of something, or a new perspective. A new perspective. I mean, every year I learn something when Christmas time, and we do the Christmas shows, Halloween, even Valentine's Day. I learn something new, or I sort of gain. It's like every year's another level of initiation. Like I gain a slightly different or slightly unique interpretation or a perspective on one of these holy days. We just had Setsubun over here in Japan. Setsubun's really interesting because Setsubun is the same thing we just talked about, except it revolves around soybeans. Setsubun is when you take soybeans and you throw them in order to drive out wickedness and evil and darkness and dust and all of that from the house. It means seasonal division. It's a day before the spring starts to unfold. It's now held February 3rd. And you say to evil, get out. And you say to good, come in. And people put on little masks of Oni, little red demons, and sometimes people do this in their families, that you can buy, it was like 75 cents for a bag of soybeans. These are good soybeans too. Like a cheap bag of soybeans here are better than a really expensive bag of soy in the United States because it's not modified here. So you get a nice little bag of soybeans and you get a little red Oni mask. People do this in their houses with kids. And the Oni masks are meant to frighten, to scare. You drive that evil out. So you put on a mask to drive the evil out, but you put on a mask also to symbolize the evil that can be driven out with the soy. Soybeans are powerful, at least in this culture. You drive out the evil with the soybeans. You could even, I guess you could argue in a conspiratorial kind of a way, like modifying the soy and taking something so essential to life in other parts of the world, modifying it. You're welcoming more evil in. You're changing the power of the soybean. Come up with a conspiracy about that. But Setsubun, we just had this here in Japan a few weeks ago. And this is another one of those spring cleaning kind of rituals. There's also a number of Roman festivals in which Lupercalia can be kind of, it can kind of be stretched because people say, oh, Lupercalia, like Saturnalia, Lupercalia. But that's not the only version of these traditions. There's other versions of these traditions too that go back to Rome. For example, there are several festivals in Rome that take place in the springtime. Those festivals all relate to February and various female goddesses. Those festivals also relate to feasting and marriages. And those sacred marriages that we saw at the Super Bowl and the Olympics, whether it's done like with that intention or not, shows us that it's still at the very core, the very root of what entertains and what drives us as human beings. It shows us that our cultures are not much different, whether they're driven by religion or the lack of religion. It shows us that we as humans are not much different. We're all very much the same. We have unique qualities, but we're all very much the same. We all really come from the same place. We're looking for the same thing or the same things. And every aspect, whether it is a spring or it's a summer or a fall or winter, every aspect, every part of the changing of the seasons has always been, and to some degree still is, personified. The Roman festivals of Februalia and Febratio were held to cleanse the home and community of dirt and crooked spirits. Crooked spirits that, if you read about the traditions over here in Japan, that's how they identify evil. Evil is crookedness. Or they don't really have a word for evil, but they have a word for evil, but in the Shintoist tradition, there's not really evil or good in the traditional sense of the word. There's clean and there's dirty. It's a very simplified version of good versus evil. It's clean and dirty. And you could be physically dirty, you could be ill dirty, like you could be possessed by something, or you could just be crooked. You're a crook. I am not a crook. You're a crook. You're crooked. The Romans believed the same thing. You wash that, cleanse that, push that out of your home. And this is also the time in which the egg would fall from the sky. Famously, Ishtar's egg. Whoever finds the egg gets a prize. We paint the eggs for Easter, right? And we get Easter, the resurrection, the rising of the Savior. When is Easter this year? Easter is, let's see when the date of Easter is. April 5th. April 5th. So we just combine all of these traditions and we stick them on one day. That's Easter. the eggs, the bunny, follow the bad bunny, follow the white rabbit to the upside down, the other side, through the mirror, through the wormhole, the rabbit hole, etc. The rabbit is a fertility symbol. In the East, I don't know about the West. I should look this up. I know about the rabbit in the East. It is not just a symbol of fertility. It is a symbol of the alchemical marriage. In fact, there's a Japanese painting. I wonder if I could show it to you real quick in the time we have left. Oh, here it is. Yeah, there's a Japanese painting by Mori Ippo from 1867 that shows the rabbit on the moon, I believe, or maybe in this image. Yeah, on the moon or over top of the moon. The moon is in the background. Shows the rabbit making an elixir. There's the image right there you can see on the screen. It's very simple, like Japanese art, but a rabbit is making the elixir. And the moon is also home of the elixir in both India and Japan. It's probably in Japan because it came from India. But what does that represent? What is the elixir? It's the elixir of life. It's eternity, everlasting life. The earth doesn't die. The human doesn't die. Things only transition and evolve. And the elixir is also that magical substance that brings it all together, that makes everything make sense. It's the golden substance. It's the golden gateway. It's the marriage. You're making the elixir by combining things in like a witch's brew, putting them together into this concoction. And when you're doing that, you're merging and blending these things together. That's the sacred marriage. That's what Valentine's Day is all about. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. tstradio.info, artiegable@yahoo.com. I would highly recommend, if you haven't done so yet, getting a copy of my book, Occult Arcana. It is available at tstradio.info. That's tstradio.info. If you visit the website, you can get a copy of the book right now, a digital copy. I will send that file over to you as soon as you get you get onto the page there and you click on, I think it's mostly through Stripe, but we have Cash App as well. You can do it through Stripe, though. It's a little bit easier, probably. I'll send you the copy of the book as soon as possible. I do everything manually, very antiquated and old school, but I like to have that direct connection with each individual listener and each individual person who gets a copy of a book. So get a copy of Occult Arcana there on the website, tstradio.info. If you want to learn about religious metaphors and religious stories and all that, you can check out Garden of Hallucinations. That's another book that I wrote. It's a much smaller book than Occult Arcana. Or my new book, Protocols of Goyim, which has a lot of this stuff in it as well. artiegable@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evenings. I know for a lot of you, you're not really taking time out. You're just showing up because you enjoy listening and watching the show. I don't do video shows often because there's no reason to put so much effort into something that doesn't get seen by many people. So we do this as a Friday thing for really hardcore listeners of the show who have always been there to support the show, who have always been there to give criticism as much as compliment. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for listening to the show and supporting the Secret Teachings for 16 years. Some of you have been listening for 16 years. How long have you been listening, Malorcas? It's been like 14 years. It's been a long time. It's amazing that people listen for so long. And I have, in putting tonight's show together, I really, I might just do a whole week of stuff like this next week and just completely ignore news as much as I can. I still have to cover certain things. Yeah, Malorcas, I know you've been listening for a while. Cosmic K123 in the chat. Thank you for joining us. I saw you commenting earlier about how you like the language I'm speaking. Glad that you enjoyed the show tonight. Malorcas asked about a show with Chris Michaels. We did a live show with Chris. We could do a live Friday show with Chris. I'll ask him if he's available soon, and we can do a live Friday show. Tim Curley, thank you for listening, Tim. Tim, you're going to like this, and some of you might not like this, but I know Tim will like this. I'm going to do I want to do a super soldier show soon. I want to talk about super soldiers because I just saw Ishmael Perez interviewing some other. He's a whack job, but he interviewed another whack job, and it's a toss up between who's the bigger whack job. I want to do a super soldier show soon, so maybe we'll do something like that. Maybe we'll do. I got so many shows planned, and I got to get co-hosts back on. So maybe we'll do that next week. I'm not exactly sure. Antonio, thank you for joining us. Chris, thank you in the chat. I see you. Chris Vellner, Rebecca, Deborah. Cool channel name. Crazy. I think we have 2 or 3 crazy people in the chat. And hey, I'm crazy too. We got a lot of crazy people in the chat, and your host is crazy tonight. Little self-deprecation. It's okay. I'm scrolling through the chat here. I don't see too many other additional new people. I think I named everybody. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. As always. Oh, before I say as always, I see a new listener. Seinfeld88 is in the chat. I'm a new listener. Do you know who Thomas Sheridan is? And would you have him on the show? Maybe I know that name. That kind of sounds familiar. I would really have anybody on the show as long as they're willing to have an honest conversation, especially if we don't agree on things. Mojo Psalms, I see you in the chat too. Thank you for joining us. Aloha from Maui. Hope you painted your roof blue. That's a joke. Johnny, I see Johnny in the chat. Early Girl is also here. Hello, Early. Yeah, Tim, I see Tim has already seen it. Yes, it was Ishmael Perez with the Space Mermaid lady. Space Mermaid, yeah. Oh, yeah, I have to cover that, Tim. I have to cover that. All right, have a great night. Let me pull up the music here, and we'll get out. I'm going to have a good weekend. I've been watching the Olympics. I've actually been enjoying it, except for that one American figure skater. Making everything about LGBTQ. I want to enjoy some Olympic hockey. I don't care about your sexual preferences. Just want to enjoy some Olympic hockey. So that's what I'm going to go do today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you have a great night, a great weekend, a great Lupercalia, a great February, a great Valentine's Day. I will talk to you in the next broadcast. Bye-bye.